First off today, the freshman congressman from the 5th District, Chris Murphy. Congressman Murphy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, you've been in office 9 months. How's it going so far? How do you like it?
You know, it's thrilling. I mean, you name the issue right now, whether it's healthcare, the war in Iraq, energy policy, immigration, it's on the front burner in Washington. Now, that being said, it's a pretty incredible adjustment going from the state legislature, where I was for 8 years, to Washington. It's an exhausting process if you want to do it right, to be back in Connecticut every weekend, being as active and as out there as you can, and getting involved in as many issues as you can down there. It's been a thrilling first 7 months.
What's your, yeah, 7 months. I said 9. 7. I can't even count this year on the calendar. What would you say has been your biggest accomplishment?
Well, I think the thing that I'm proudest of is a bill that we passed just last week, which is the bill that greatly expands on our children's health care program in this country and in Connecticut. I mean, I just think that our health care system is fundamentally broken, and I frankly think we need a much bigger fix in the long run. But we passed comprehensive health care reform legislation in the House right before we broke for our August break that is going to potentially cover 30,000 more kids through the Husky plan in Connecticut. It fixes a lot of the things that were broken with the Medicare prescription drug program to get rid of some of the penalties and lock-in provisions for seniors. And it also helps some of the problems with paying doctors to cover people with Medicare. It's a fix that's going to work for the next couple of years. It's really important. We got to do a lot more, but that's something I'm really proud of.
What has been your biggest disappointment?
You know, I obviously came to Washington as a major critic of this war, and I think it's not only doing great damage to our credibility around the world, but I think, frankly, it's making us less safe rather than more safe. And I would have liked to have seen much quicker progress in terms of changing the direction of this war. You know, the fact is that Washington and our democratic system there is not built for overnight change, and the president is going to veto any bill that reaches his desk that changes course in Iraq, and the Senate is a little bit slower than the House. So my greatest disappointment is that we haven't really enacted the will of the people. It's pretty clear that the people want us to change course in Iraq, redeploy our forces. I know we're going to have another major debate on that issue in September, and I hope that finally we start to wake up some folks on the other side of the aisle that we've got to change course.
President Bush's approval rating is one of the lowest in history among any American president, and some polls show Congress's approval rating to be lower. Yeah. A lot of voters don't think that the Democrats are doing their job. They were voted to end this war, and they're not doing it. How do you react to that?
You know, when I hear it when I'm back, when I'm back in Connecticut, and you try to explain to people that even though we have a majority in the House, it's a very slim majority, and the fact is that on very reasonable bills to start the withdrawal from Iraq sometime next fall, we can only get 3 or 4 Republicans to vote for it. And until we have a veto-proof majority, it's very difficult to do that. I think also part of the problem is that people are still watching a lot of members to Congress, going into federal prisons and under investigation. And until we get our own shop in order, frankly, I wouldn't expect that people would have a really good impression of Congress. I've been working a lot on ethics reform, trying to make sure that Congress is tightening its rules for members of Congress and enforcing them. And I think that that's a big part of making people believe in government again, is making them think that Congress is actually making sure that folks are held accountable for their misdeeds.
Is this war winnable?
I think you have to ask which war we're talking about. I mean, if we're talking about the global battle against Islamic extremism, I think it is. But I think that what we're doing in Iraq is, frankly, making it less possible to win that war in the long run. I think we are, frankly, fueling those who hate this country, those who would want to do harm to us, by our actions and our strategy in Iraq. I think the war, in a more global sense, is absolutely winnable. But I think that in order to focus on that, we have got to start handing over control of Iraq to the Iraqis themselves. And
what would you do if it were your decision? What would you do right now with Iraq?
I would set a timeline to tell the Iraqis when we are going to leave. I think that it probably makes sense to leave some minimalist force there to continue to help with some of the training with border control. But the fact is that the entire reason for this surge that the President outlined was to be able to give the Iraqis the time to have some political reconciliation there. They are farther away from political reconciliation than they ever have been. And until we remove the crutch that is American military might there, they are not going to make the tough political concessions in order to stabilize that country in the long run.
You have endorsed Senator Christopher Dodd for president in the 2008 election. Why should voters choose him over Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama? Why is he a better candidate than them?
Well, I think we need a president in these turbulent times who's going to hit the ground running. And the fact is there's nobody in this race who has a greater amount of experience on the domestic front. Chris Dodd, a leader for children's issues and family issues for over 20 years in the Senate, and one of the brightest foreign policy minds in this country. I think he's someone who's ready to get the job done. And frankly, he's been, I think, one of the bravest members of the Senate in standing up to this president, not only in the war in Iraq, but in this idea that the president has sold to the American people that there's some choice to be made between civil liberties and human rights and national security. It's been Chris Dodd who's been telling the American people and telling his fellow senators that we can protect this country while still upholding our Constitution. And for that, I think he deserves a lot of credit, and I'm proud to support him.
You know a lot about defeating a giant. You beat Congresswoman Nancy Johnson after more than 2 decades in Congress. He's sort of going after another giant, Hillary Clinton. What are Senator Clinton's weaknesses and Senator Obama's weaknesses that you would maybe advise Senator Dodd to work on?
Well, listen, frankly, I think the strength of the Democratic field is that we have a lot of great candidates. And my support for Dodd doesn't mean that I don't think that Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or John Edwards or anyone else would make a great president. Frankly, given the standard that we're holding people to, and President Bush, who has really, I think, completely walked away from any responsibility to Congress or to the American people, I think that they'd all make great presidents. I think Dodd's strength is not in the weaknesses of other candidates. It's in his experience and his track record in the U.S. Senate.
We did have, one complaint from, one constituent who said, well, you should ask him, why is he already raising money to run in 2008? I mean, you've been in office 7 months, and it's been going on pretty much your whole term, the fundraising.
And I draw back the curtain on this. I mean, I don't try to hide the fact that as a first-term member of Congress in a district that was Republican for 20 years, you basically go right back to raising money. You're not campaigning all the time, but we have got to fix our campaign finance system. It is absurd that a first-term member of Congress is spending part of every week raising money rather than working on issues, getting to know their colleagues. And this is not just me. This is pretty much every single member of Congress in Washington is spending some amount of time raising money. We need to publicly finance congressional campaigns. Not an easy issue, not a non-controversial issue, but the fact is we have to acknowledge that democracy has a price, and you have to decide whether you want to pay for it in the front door or through the back door. The problem with the current system is not only that somebody like me has to start raising money immediately, but also all these lobbyists and PACs and special interests have an entree into Washington because of the donations that they make. Public financing of congressional campaigns, if we do it, is not a cure-all, but it is a multi-systemic approach to a lot of the ills of government right now.
Let's look down the road a little bit, way off in the future. You're young, you're ambitious. There's a buzz about Congressman Chris Murphy, you're one of the rising stars in Congress. What is next for you if Dodd is elected president? Would you run for Senate in 2010?
You know what? I have so much on my plate just to get this job done right. This is an absolute thrill, the greatest experience of my life to be able to serve the residents of the 5th Congressional District, and I have absolutely no plans beyond doing the best job that I can for the next year and a half.
Congressman Chris Murphy, thank you so much for being with us on this Sunday morning.